About 15 years ago, Joy Williams was having a moment with her daughter.
She was probably 4 or 5 at the time. She had made a big mess in her room. Literally everything was on the floor. And I told her, okay, you need to clean up your room and then you can come out and play with everyone. And we were just sitting on the front porch. So it wasn't like we were leaving her in the house alone and going
Right,
down the street or anything. We were
right.
just sitting
Right.
there. And I just said, okay, clean up your room. You need to clean up your room. And she was like really resisting. And it kind of became a battle of wills. And I was really laying down the law. Like, you've got to clean this up, then you can come out and play. And her younger sister was out playing already. And she was wailing. And I was frustrated. And I just went out and sat on the front porch. And the other moms were kind of like, oh, hey, what's going on? Because they could hear her screaming from inside the house, just frustrated with me. And I was frustrated with her. And it really wasn't that big of a mess. It wasn't like a crazy thing, but I just thought she's old enough to clean up her own mess. And at that time I was pregnant and 4 seemed like an adult. And I just thought, she can do this. I know she can do this. We've done it a million times. And so I was telling the other moms, oh, she made this big mess in her room. Like, everything's on the floor. I just told her she needs to clean it up before she comes out. And there was a mom who had a degree in child psychology. And she looked me dead in the eye and she said, you know what you're asking of her is super unreasonable, right? And I was like, no, no, I was a young mom and I grew up doing chores and we were taught our kids have to clean up their rooms and they have to do that before they can play, kind of thing. All of these things are going through my mind, but I'm just staring at her like a deer in the headlights. And she said, you have given her such an ambiguous thing to do, and her brain cannot do it. Her brain can't wrap around it. She's too young for that. She doesn't know where to begin. You need to go in and you need to rephrase what you've asked her and say, okay, I want you to put all your shoes away and then come tell me. And then we'll come back and figure out what the next thing will be. And
Awesome.
I was like, okay. So I went in and I calmed her down and I said, let's start with the shoes. Why don't you put all the shoes away? I'm going to go out in the hall and you can tell me when it's done. So she did. And then I came back in and said, okay, now how about let's pick up the dress ups? And we went through each little thing. And like I said, there wasn't that much out. It was just, she just kind of thrown a bunch of stuff on the floor and it was all mixed together. And like that mom said, she was just overwhelmed. She didn't know where to begin.
Yeah. Welcome to the Family Lab podcast, where we investigate all things parenting and home management. In today's lab, we're going to be talking about chores since it is spring cleaning time. And here to help us is Joy Williams. I've been following Joy for several years, and I've always meant to get around to trying her Shine guides. So she has developed these guides that give you step-by-step instructions of how to clean everything in your house, along with pictures for kids that don't read. It's this great solution to a problem we've all had. I've done this here and there for one chore or another, but I've never done a very comprehensive guide, and I always get them lost and things like that. So I finally decided to try some of her guides, and so that's the experiment that we're going to be doing in my house for the month of April. So I thought we'd have her on to talk about chores, how to help motivate kids to do chores, how to break it down into easy steps. I had just this great conversation with her, and she is making it easy for us to try her guides because she's offering listeners a discount of 15% with the code TFL15. So you can find her guides at theshineguides.com, and we'll link that in the show notes along with the code. I would love to find out what you're experimenting with in your families right now. And probably the best way to do that is to come to my online open lab sessions on Wednesdays from 10 to 11 Mountain Time. And there's a link to that in the show notes as well. I'll be doing this through the month of April, and then we'll take a break for the craziness of May and then summer. And we'll start back up again in August. But I would love to meet you. There's usually a pretty low turnout, so it's low pressure, and we can just meet each other and chat. So come join us. I'd love to meet you. And now let's get on with our conversation with Joy Williams. Why do you think it's important for kids to learn skills to help around the house?
This is a great question because when I was first making the Shine guides and I posted them online, I kind of ended up on the wrong side of the internet. People were criticizing me and saying, this is child labor and kids should just play, And so I was like, oh, maybe they're right and I'm wrong. But it was very easy to find so many articles and studies that support kids doing chores for so many different reasons. But one of the main reasons is just like their emotional well-being and a feeling of belonging in the family. It is
Yeah.
such an important thing for kids to feel like they are contributing to the family unit. And it helps them in so many different ways, like self-esteem and delayed gratification and overcoming adversity and things like that. There are so many positive hard and soft skills that come from doing chores. So it's definitely not that at all. It's not even about like the cleaning, like getting things clean as much as it is building these skills.
Yes, and I would love to talk about those next. Like, which of these skills are most important to you? When you plan your system for chores with your kids, what are you really trying to accomplish with them?
So for our family personally, I do think it's important for them to all contribute to the cleanliness of the house, but also for different kids, it's different things. It's kind of a hard
I
question for me
like
to
that.
answer because your kids
Yeah.
are also different. For some kids, I think that delayed gratification is really good for them to learn. I am a mom who likes to say yes. And I'm also a mom who likes my kids to have like a lot of social activities and interactions. And it's hard for me to say, like, no, you have to do this first, or we have to get this done first. So I don't do it very often. So I
Uh-huh.
think that probably the do this first, then do that is a good thing for them to learn. Um, Also, just the contributing. Like, we all contribute to the
Yeah.
house. We're all going to do it together, and this is your part. And it kind of goes along what I said before, where that feeling of contribution helps with the feeling of belonging in the family unit and feeling like we're all in it together. And so for some kids, I think that's the most beneficial thing is feeling like we're
Right.
all in this together. We're all belonging. You are in this family. So yeah, for different kids, I think it's different things.
For me, one of the big things is to alleviate that sense of entitlement because, we live a comfortable lifestyle and I don't want them to just feel like everything's always going to be handed to them or that they don't have to contribute. So that contribution that we were talking about, but also like recognizing the adults in their lives and other people in their lives as people who also don't like to do chores necessarily,
Uh-huh.
like if I always have this conversation going with them like, okay, if you don't do it, I want you to think about who will be doing it. And if that person is me, I want you to ask me directly and say, Mom, I don't have time to do this. Will you do this for me? And like acknowledge that if they don't do their jobs, then somebody will have to, and it shouldn't just be defaulted to somebody like me.
Yeah.
Or just recognize that the work has to get done somehow. Why not them?
No, totally. This is something I hear a lot from parents, especially when it comes to the topic of paying or not paying for chores too.
Right.
Everybody has a different way that they do that, but that is one thing that people really take into consideration is we are all part of this family unit. This work has to get done. How are we going to make this work for our family in a way that it's going to teach our kids about just the actual idea that work has to be done. And if you don't do it, someone else has to do it. The fairy doesn't just come and fold your laundry or whatever. The other thing is, there are enough categories of chores that each week between my four kids, I rotate them around. So
Mm.
they learn to do a variety of things. So even if it's a shared bathroom situation, for example, and one kid is cleaning it one week, then they are more mindful going forward about what that entails and maybe clean up after themselves a little better for the next person that comes along.
Well, and then there's also the piece that eventually they're going to grow up and leave the house and they will have all these messes to take care of. They have to learn it somehow or another. But I have a lot of sons and I have four sons and I want them to be a major contributor in their own homes and not to default to anybody else in their own homes too. They're going to have to be cleaning up messes all their lives. So
Totally. This is going to be a huge part of their adult life, as we know, is cleaning up after ourselves, running a household, taking care of the things that are in the house and making sure that they're well taken care of so that they keep working.
So take me back to the point where you decided, okay, it's time to teach these kids how to help me clean. It's time to start some sort of chore system.
So my kids are all born in kind of a consolidated period of time. So it was around the time that my youngest was maybe 3. My older 2 had been doing easy chores, like unloading the silverware into the drawer, things like that. But I hadn't really started teaching them, to properly wipe down a bathroom or things like that. And so they were all entering that phase of chores, and there were so many of them, and there were so many chores. And we had just built a new house, and I wanted to make sure that they were able to help in all the different aspects of that and all the different new places that we had just built and spent all this time and money on. And I wanted to make sure it stayed clean and nice. And I wanted them to know how to do it too. And so I was trying to brainstorm, how could I do this with them? Because as I was trying, I was realizing it was overwhelming for me to try to teach all of these kids all at the same time, all the different chores.
Yeah, it's work. It is hard work.
It is hard work. And I think that that is a reason why a lot of chore systems go by the wayside for people, because of the mental and physical energy it takes to teach your kids to do chores. It is work for you. I think a lot of times people think, oh, the kids doing chores is taking a load off of you, which in some ways it is, but in a lot of ways it's not.
Right. And not for a long time. There's a major upfront investment, right?
A lot of micromanagement on your part.
Yeah. So you have to teach them the skills. You have to manage them actually doing it, all of those things. I mean, I don't know that the investment starts paying off sometimes until they're teenagers. I mean, it's
totally. And it's the investment of them learning to do it on their own. Right. And for me, my kids were in the phase where they love to like run outside and play or whatever on Saturdays. So we would wake up in the morning and we'd have their list of chores for each of them. But then what I found was, no one ever remembered how to do the chore. I was always having to go from kid to kid to kid, reminding them how to do the chore. And some of my kids didn't read, so I couldn't write it down for them. And of course, those kids' chores, the ones that couldn't read, they were very simple chores. But my older ones, where they were a little more involved with lots of steps, I found myself having to step in, which was frustrating for everyone, hold it back in from playing outside and say, hey, you only did about half of what you were supposed to do. Let's go over this again. And it was just repeat, repeat, repeat.
Right. Well, yeah, because I guess there's kind of 3 main steps. There's managing the task in the first place, like making sure they're going to do it. And there's teaching them the task. And there's also the inspection afterwards where you have to then make sure. So for a very long time, it takes much longer to have your kids help you than to just do it yourself, which is, I think, a big barrier to entry. I could get this bathroom whipped out in 15 minutes, but if I have my kids do it, it could even take the whole day because just motivating them and dealing with the whining, all those things. So what do you say to moms to encourage them to make that investment and put in the work?
I mean, the payoff is worth it. The payoff is worth it in the end. I now have a child at college who can do all of these things, and it's on her radar to do them. It's in her habits to do them, to make sure that she is straightening up after herself. She's living with roommates. You don't want the kid that goes to college and is the one leaving stuff everywhere, because she's had a roommate like that. Thankfully.
Yeah, we all have.
Right. But it really stands out when somebody is not pulling their weight, and it can cause relationship issues between the people that are living together. And so whether they're going to live with roommates, they're going to live with a spouse, or they're just going to live on their own, the payoff is worth it. These are life skills that they need to know.
Well, and it's a lot easier to start with the habits than have to break really bad habits later. It sounds so counterintuitive, but it really is a gift that we're giving our kids. And there's no way they're going to see that probably until, way into adulthood. But it really is such a gift to give them that self-sufficiency and those skills, so they don't have to worry about it. Yeah, they can learn them as adults and sure, they'll figure it out eventually, but what a nice little gift we can give them to not have to worry about the logistics when they're also worrying about the emotional side of being away from home and all those things.
Yes. And my daughter definitely appreciates those skills, and she appreciates the other people in her life who has those skills.
Yeah.
It just helps make a really harmonious living situation.
Okay. So you've decided you want to have your kids start helping with the chores. You're trying to teach them. How did you end up developing these guides for them?
We had moved into the new house, and I thought, I'm going to write down every single step of this chore. But then, like I said, I had a child who couldn't read. So I decided I'm also going to photograph every step. So as she starts getting older and, obviously she'll develop the skills to read, but they start slow and she'll be able to look at the pictures and follow along. And boy, did I not realize how helpful that was going to be, not only for our family, but for so many families.
Yeah, that is great. So how have you kind of reinforced that and like directed them back to those guides as they've grown and as they've developed?
The system that works for us and the system I suggest for families is we keep the guides together. And then on our designated chore day, I spread them into 4 piles because I have 4 kids. And so I spread them into 4 piles. I have mine laminated, so I can even put a dry erase marker with them so they can mark them off as they go.
Nice.
But then they pick up their pile and they go do the thing. So I don't just say, oh, go clean the bathroom, and then the instructions are somewhere in the bathroom and they ignore them. So they're holding them in their hand as they go up to do it. And I also, since we're talking about the way I do it, is once I make those piles, I also set out all the cleaning supplies that they need so they can take those with them as well.
Okay, so let's talk, let's like break it into the actual system. How do you assign these chores? What are they responsible for each week? And yeah, just walk me through your system.
The way I found that has worked best for our family, and every family is different, so you have to find the way that works for your family. But the best way for our family, especially since our kids were all consolidated in this kind of like same phase of life for so long, Saturday morning chores worked the best for us. And as my kids got older, some of them started sleeping in on Saturdays, and I was totally fine with that. Like, we didn't all have to do the chores all at the same time. But when they would come down to their kitchen, their pile would be waiting for them on the countertop. And when I say pile, I would say they had 3 to 4.
Okay.
3 to 4 every week. So it wasn't like a huge pile of chores. So each kid, I would wake up and I would set out the piles. I would actually write their initial on the top with the dry erase marker, set the dry erase marker on it, and then I'd have all the supplies sitting out. And so whenever they meandered down to the kitchen for breakfast, their pile was sitting there waiting for them. And it got to the point I really didn't have to say, like, it's Saturday, you have to do your chores. They knew what to expect. Knowing what to expect is such a huge component of chores and getting them done correctly. This knowing what to expect and understanding how to execute without the overwhelm has worked better than any sticker chart, reward chart. Any reward I could give them has not motivated them as well as knowing what to do. Just understanding what they're supposed to do and not having it feel like this big, scary, ambiguous thing. It's just like check, check, check.
Yeah, well, and I've made the mistake of like, oh, well, you did that. Well, I forgot. I also have this to tell. Like that sneak attack of adding things on after they think they're done and free to go, and then I'm like, oh wait, but I forgot that you made this giant mess over here, and so just kind of taking a moment to really like, what do I want them to do today, and really have that clearly defined so they don't feel like, well, I'm just enslaved for the whole day. I'm just stuck here and I'm never going to be free. That's probably my biggest toxic trait of chore assignments.
I think that's really relatable. I mean, I think that the more we know what we're expecting and then they know what they are expected to do, just the smoother it goes for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And then, as they become more competent, they take on more of that management, more of that mental load, more of they don't have to be supervised as much, and yeah, they just understand the expectations. So yeah, part of that training that we talked about. So what have been some of the struggles that you've had with kids getting them to execute on this system?
The biggest struggle is me.
So I can relate.
It's being consistent, honestly.
Yeah.
If I'm consistent, then it goes really smoothly. Managing expectations, obviously, making sure that you are giving age appropriate chores, which when they're broken down into steps, they actually all become pretty easy. to be honest. But there are some that
Yeah.
it's like it requires them to use a handheld vacuum cleaner to do our stairs or something like that. Then maybe that's like a little complex for a little child to do. But if I have it sitting there already for them, then it's easy for them to do. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
right. And at some level, once they're physically capable, yeah.
yeah. So it's mainly just me making sure that on the designated days that they're doing chores, having the stuff set out for them and having it ready to go so that it
Yeah.
really takes a lot of the brain work out of it.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what I was driving at when I was talking about how I used to, like research the age appropriate chores and stuff like that. I think I was making it so much more complex than it needs to be because we've now moved to a system where it's basically an apprenticeship system. So, if you're assigning all these chores, they can do any chore at an age appropriate level. So sometimes that means they require the assistance of an adult or an older child, but they can still start learning how to do some level of that chore.
Mhm. Yes, and along with the guides, I include a little how to, or this is what I recommend. I actually think it's in my guide description when you're purchasing them, but I always recommend that for the first few times you go through it with them. You don't just hand
Nice.
them the guide and say goodbye. You hand them the guide and then you go with them and you walk through like, see this? This is what we're doing here. And see that? That's what we're doing there. And you can either have them do it while you stand there with them, or you can do it while they follow along on the guide.
Yeah.
There's still work on your part. It just makes it so much smoother for everyone to have something that is clear and easy to follow so that even you're not sitting there going, oh, well, actually, before that, you were supposed to do this or whatever. It's laid out for everyone, but they still do need an example before they go get started, especially if they're younger. I mean, if you're starting with a 12-year-old, then maybe they won't. But if
Right.
you're starting them young, then yeah, show them what to do. Go with them. Show them it's not going to be hard and scary. And all they have to do is follow along. And that's usually all they need.
And honestly, I have to do that for myself too. Like a while ago, I made up, I guess, my own guide for the kitchen so that I just remember the order to do it. Because so many times when I go to my kitchen, I'm like, oh, this needs to be done. I'm a crazy person. I'm just like hopping from one job to the next because I see if I'm putting out fires here, there, everywhere. But when I follow the guide that I made myself, where I'm like, okay, first put away the clean dishes. Every time, start with the clean dishes and don't move to the next step until the clean dishes are put away. Okay, now load the dirty dishes in the sink into the dishwasher. Like I have my set routine, and then I don't have to reinvent it or think of it. And I mean, what works for adult brains, even more important for children's brains to just like keep them on task.
Yeah. Staying on task is hard for everybody. This is why adults make lists all the time to check off their list and say, okay, here are all the things I need to get done today. And I'm just going to go through them and move through them. It works well for most people to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even more so if there's neurodivergence involved, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
And
That's awesome.
I have that, and a lot of people do.
Mhm.
So I really empathize with that.
Yeah. Well, I just love that you've done the work for us because frankly, when I was making my own guides, which were not pretty and were just lists in in a Word document, it took me a long time to go through and here's how you do laundry, here's how you clean a bathroom, here's how you clean a bedroom. It takes a lot of work. So I appreciate that you kind of take that work off everybody's hands and they can just buy your guides ready-made with pictures so they don't have to figure out I mean that took a lot of work for you to make those originally, I'm sure. And I'm sure
It
you've
took a long
even
time.
redone them since then.
They've gone through a few edits to make them acceptable for the public. Because the first time I did it, I was literally photographing my kids in their pajamas with their bed head, just for myself. I just never realized
Yeah.
that other people would be able to use them too. So they have gone through several different polishes.
When did you decide, oh, I'm going to sell these?
Pretty quickly, I had neighbors dropping by and they saw them and asked what they were. And I was like, oh, I just did this. And people were like, oh my gosh, I want
I
them.
need
I want
those.
them. Everybody wanted them. And I was like, oh yeah, I should have thought of that. These would be something that other people would find useful too. And I kind of let it hold me back a little bit that it was my house. Like I was like, oh, I don't know if people are gonna like that it's not their house, it's my house. But the steps work no matter where you are. A toilet's a toilet,
Right.
So, and I actually just released them editable so people can upload their own pictures into Canva if they want and put in their own kids doing it. As you said, there are a lot of kids who struggle to stay on task.
Yeah.
Kids, teenagers, adults. I've had adults say they buy it for themselves. I have had parents buy it for their kids who are going to live on their own for the first time. Um, I think it is a really relatable thing that people get distracted. And when something isn't exciting or fun or seems tedious or boring, and there's a lot of steps involved, it's very easy to get off track and go do something else. So yeah, the feedback has been great. And I did not realize what a wide variety of people were going to benefit from this concept.
That's
So
awesome.
it's been really gratifying for me.
That's so great. Okay, so let's go back to how it runs at your house. I just would like to know what a typical stack looks like for any one of your kids. How do you decide who does what and how much to give them on any given Saturday?
I have a category that I consider to be weekly chores, things that are done about on a weekly basis. Maybe not every week, but almost every week. And I have those in a stack. And when I'm dividing them into who's doing what, I do take a little bit of stock as to whether or not something really needs to be done again if it was just done last week. And then I just divide them up into piles based on what needs to be done. And I try to make the piles even. So that is one thing that I do
Yes.
try to do is make things even. And if there's something that can possibly wait till next week and it's going to make the chores even, then I'll take it out or whatever. But I have 4 kids and an average of about 25 chores to choose from that I would consider to be weekly chores. And
Okay.
so I would give them around 4 a week to do. And I try to vary them as far as difficulty goes now because all my kids are able to do the same difficulty of chore. But maybe when I had younger ones, they would get the easier ones and my older ones would get a little more difficult ones. So
Right.
that's
Okay.
kind of how I do it. Just taking it a week by week basis, but making sure that every week there is something to do.
Okay. So give me my assignments for this week. What does my stack look like?
Your stack? Okay. So you would have clean the powder room, which is a little more extensive. And included with that, you would have the toilet.
Uh-huh.
I have that in its own guide because the toilet has so many steps all on its own.
That's
And
smart.
then you would have dusting the baseboards and the windowsills because that's a much easier job. And I give my kids a Swiffer to do that. So it's pretty quick and easy. And then wiping the doorknobs and light switches. So that would be
Okay.
4 chores, kind of varying in difficulty and how long that they would take. Another kid would have cleaning all of the appliance fronts in the kitchen. So wiping them with either a stainless steel wipe or a microfiber cloth and getting all the fingerprints off. And then they would have cleaning the microwave on the inside. And then they would have dusting off between the spindles of the stairs and wiping the banisters.
Awesome. Okay. No, that gives me a better
Mhm.
idea for the scope. So none of these are things that are going to take them all day.
No. Oh, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Generally, my kids, about a half hour total.
Awesome. Yeah, depending on, I have different children that half hour of actual work could be spread over a longer amount of time because they procrastinate or get distracted. But yeah, as far as like actual working time, I like that. It's actually maybe resolving one of the problems I'm having. So I've kind of gone back and forth with different systems. Experimented with a lot of things. And I've tried lately to start doing it by time. Like you owe me an hour a week of and that can be spread over several days or it can be on Saturdays just because they have different schedules. And so sometimes I'm like, great, you made dinner on Monday, so that's your hour for the week and you're done. And that system is working pretty well, but one of my children, who will remain nameless, was like, yeah, why would I work hard? Why would I work fast and hard during that hour if I'm gonna I get the same amount of credit if I do it in a lazy way? And he was just being really honest with me, like, maybe there's a flaw in your system, Mom. So I've done different things where they've been in charge of like a zone for a month, or been in charge of a certain amount of time each week. And I've had varying levels of success with each one. I do sometimes find that just mixing it up from one system to another is helpful, just to make things fresh and new again.
Sure.
But but I like your system of like just handing them their responsibilities. And maybe for my family, just with the different schedules and different levels of busyness on Saturday, maybe I just give them kind of their stack at the beginning of the week, and then they can learn to manage their time and get that done by a deadline. That might be a way that we could apply it and make it work better for us.
You're describing something that is so relatable in families, is
Yeah.
trying to figure out the system. I think that that is a huge part of the battle. And it, like you said, sometimes it needs refreshing. Sometimes you have a lot of enthusiasm for a system right at the beginning and then it kind of fizzles out. Everyone can have a lot of enthusiasm about something, you
Yeah.
and your kids, and then it kind of fizzles out and becomes boring and tedious. And then you refresh it. And I think that's a really great outlook of maybe not one thing, not one way of doing it or one way of rewarding it or one way of setting it up is going to work forever. You do have to
Yeah.
roll with the punches as far as, well, now all of a sudden our Saturdays look like sporting events all
Yeah.
day long, you know?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
like you said, it's picking another night of the week, maybe Monday night, before we do family night or whatever we do. We have a half hour where we do these chores, and you have a half hour to get these chores done, or whatever it is, whatever it looks like for you. But this is, I think, one of the biggest battles that people face is figuring out how to do it. How do I get this
Yeah.
running and have my family do it along with me? When you talked about zone cleaning, I read a book years ago when my kids were little about zone cleaning, but it
Uh-huh.
came along with this really complicated system of payment. And
Yeah.
I remember being like, okay,
I
we're
think
going
we
to
might
do
have
it.
read the same book.
Yep. Yep. And I printed out little sheets so I could mark off when they did their zones, and then they got a quarter for each. I don't know. It was too complicated. It was a great idea,
Yes.
but way
Yeah.
too complicated for our family. But the zone thing worked for a while, you know? So I think you do need to be a little flexible with how this works. Like if you're using the chore guides, for example, maybe you divide them all into kitchen and that's the kitchen zone, or, you kind of make it work how it works best for everyone in the time that it's working. And then when it's not working anymore, you switch it up, and that's okay too.
That I like the flexibility of that, because either way, the same tasks need to be done in those areas, and you can assign them as they are. And have you always done it on Saturdays, or have you tried different systems in your house?
Frankly, we have moved a few times over the past year and
Huh?
our systems have gotten completely disrupted. So it's funny that I'm on this podcast talking about it because I'm thinking, oh, I haven't actually pulled out my chore guides in a little while. And I need to, because my kids have grown up with them and they know how to do the chores now. And my youngest is 13. So 10 years is how long I've had them.
Yeah.
So I don't pull them out as often, but we're in a new place now and we're kind of getting used to our new space. And I think it would be really helpful to have those steps back out again because they were very acquainted with their own home and doing them there. But we moved from Indiana to Utah about a year and a half ago, and we lived in a rental house for a while. And then we just moved into the house that we purchased. So we're getting back into the swing of it, but it does look different now that my kids are older. In that year and a half, our family has really changed a lot too, as far as what activities we have on Saturdays. We've had a child move out, just things like that. So kind of getting back into the swing and realizing, okay, this is looking a little different now. And maybe Saturdays aren't the greatest day anymore. So it's something that I have to reevaluate too for my family.
Awesome. Okay, so do you also have like anything they're supposed to do daily? Like, what do you do about like daily kitchen maintenance, things like that? How do they help with that?
Yes, they do have daily things that they are responsible for as well. And I do have guides to help them through that as needed. So
Of course you do. That's great. I love it.
we've got loading the dishes, unloading the dishes, setting the table, clearing the table, taking out the garbage. Because while taking out the garbage to the curb is a weekly chore, taking the garbage from the kitchen to the garbage can is more of a daily chore. And
Right.
then I also have in there making their bed in the morning. I don't know if you have read studies about making beds, but apparently it's just amazing for your day and your productivity, and it just sets you off on the right foot for so many good things. So I do like them to do those, to make their bed in the morning if they can. Um, Sometimes they're leaving the house at 5 in the morning and maybe they're not making their,
Right.
that's okay. I'm pretty flexible when it comes to that. But yes, so on the daily basis, I do like them to do at least one thing: unload the dishes, load the dishes, clear the table, or something like that.
But that's does
It's a
that
lot more
just
flexible.
change? Does that change based on the day? Like, how do you decide who does what?
Mhm. Kind of like you talked about your hour. I like
Uh-huh.
to grab a kid to do one thing, and it's a lot more informal. So I
Okay.
just want to make sure somebody is contributing in some way. And sometimes the contributing looks like them being really dedicated to the thing that they're supposed to do that day, whether it be a sport or a job. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if a kid has gone from school to work, I don't expect them to come home and unload the dishes. And maybe that's because I am too easy on them. I do think that I am a just natural empath. And so
Uh-huh.
I can be a little more like, oh, you go rest, you know. So I'm a little more flexible when it comes to the day to day. I don't have like set expectations every day of how things have to look. But then if a kid comes home from school and they've been kind of vegging for 2 hours and they don't have anything for the rest of the night, I'm a lot more likely to pull them in and have them help me make dinner or something like that. Because those are skills I want them to learn as well.
Right.
But just they're a little more flexible.
Right. And lately, like even things like, I have one that can drive. And so I'll often, like, his hour is often just running to the grocery store for me. And that is the family contribution that I need him to make, especially after my injuries. Like,
Yeah.
shopping is really hard for me. And so, like, sending him to Sam's Club is like the most amazing thing. And so yeah. So when I'm talking like that hour, it varies a lot from week to week and child to child. But, you know, for him, he likes to do the grocery shopping, and so sometimes that flexibility allows me to customize it to their strengths or their, the best way that they can contribute. So that's nice. But I like that your guides also allow for you to do that. You can be like, okay, this week especially, they have a busy week. I need to give them these this week, and these are chores they can handle. So
Mhm.
isn't it interesting how much of motherhood is this balance between flexibility and consistency?
Oh my gosh, yes.
I feel like it's a constant struggle, and it should be a struggle, honestly, because if we're if we're rigidly consistent, um, when life itself is so inconsistent, we have to have that flexibility built in. So,
Yeah, that's so
so
well said. That is exactly it. You have to be able to bend and flex with life because that's how their whole life is going to be.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's kind of key to all of this is to set up our house in a way that mimics the real world in a lot of ways, like yeah, there are going to be natural consequences. The work has to get done. Life is messy. We just have to deal with that reality, and so it's not this big surprise for our kids. Okay. Okay, so we've come to that part of our episode where we give our listeners some experiments that they can try at home. What are the experiments that you thought of for them to try?
So, depending on how old your kids are, is going to
Mhm.
depend on the experiment. But for younger kids, I would say start small and don't be afraid to give them some responsibility because there are so many things that even young kids can do. They can water plants, and that can look like you pouring 1 cup of water into something so they don't overwater the plants. You know, really set them up for success, but give them little things that they can do. They can pour the dog food into the bowl. They can wipe the faux plants. They can dust the faux plants. They can wipe off a leather couch, just little things like that that are just really easy for them. And of course, you're not expecting perfection, but just giving them the opportunity to contribute at the same time that everyone else is contributing. So that would be
Awesome.
experiment number one is start small when they're small and just let them feel like they're a part of things. Number two, when you graduate to the bigger chores or if your kids are already older, experiment with being really clear. Try the breaking it down into the steps. You do not have to come purchase the chore guides to make this work in your own household. It can look like just writing a to-do list, but making it specific. Do not be vague so that they get overwhelmed with the overall idea. Just be
Mm.
really specific and experiment with that and see how that goes with your kids.
Oh, I love those so much. Okay, so one I would like to add is when I was teaching my kids, I don't even remember, the credit is due to somebody, and I can't remember where I read this, but somebody suggested having somebody outside your family teach them to do some of these skills. And I have done that, and it has been so fabulous. So sometimes it was a friend, sometimes it was a family member. But just especially there are certain personalities who struggle with learning things from me. So I remember one time I had a friend come over and teach my son how to clean a toilet. And she just taught him her method. And it was a little different than mine, which was even better for that child because then he could be like, oh, I know the right way to do this. That made him feel very important. And so she taught him, and then he taught me, which we know is even a better way to reinforce teaching something. And there was no power struggle. It was like amazing to watch because he was like, oh, that's a great idea. Like he was really responding to her. And then he wanted to show me, what she had taught. And it was just a great experience. So we've done that in a couple different ways with a couple different kids. And that has been hugely helpful.
I love this so much because I think that when we go into parenthood, and I'm sure you've had other guests talk about this specific subject before, but I think you think that parenthood is going to look this really specific way, and it looks that
Yes.
way for everyone. And especially when it comes to something like this, where so many people struggle with the system and the follow through and things like that, they can look around and think, oh, this is working for everyone else, or this other families do it this way. Why doesn't it work this way for our family? And every kid is so different. My kids are also very different. And I have one also that does not learn well from me. And so I think that is such a great tip because it's not something that you would think, oh, I need to pull another adult into my life to show my kids how to do something that I already know how to do and I could show them, but this is going to
Right.
be best for them. I love that because it kind of takes the shame out of like, oh, but I'm supposed to be the one that can do this. But
Yeah.
really, kids humble you, right? So
Oh, in every way.
I love that you shared that because I think it's such a good tool that maybe some people wouldn't even think of because they would think I'm responsible for this. I'm supposed to do this. But no, bringing in someone else. Let me just say, I was a photographer for years and years. It was the same with photographing kids. I mean, parents trying to get a natural photograph of their kids is a nightmare. But for some reason, people think like, oh, I can't get a good picture of my kids. I'll just hire someone. But then when it comes to something like chores, you think I should hold the whole load for this. And maybe you shouldn't. Maybe it will work better with someone else. So I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I need to take my own advice and do it with my youngest again because yeah, he's at that age that would really benefit from that as well. So, but that's another beautiful thing is sometimes you can find another one of your children to be the one that teaches, and then it both reinforces with them, and they pass on their knowledge and they feel important. So that's another way that can work. Okay, my next experiment is just to introduce a little competition into it, and that will just depend on your family dynamics and whether that could introduce more conflict or it could introduce more fun depending on their personalities, right? Absolutely. So for a while we had a worker of the week little statue, and it was just some dumb trophy that I had, and so I would just pay attention all week, and I would notice who did those daily chores that they have. They have daily kitchen chores that rotate each month in my family. And so I would just kind of silently watch. And that Sunday I would hand out the trophy for the worker of the week. This trophy is actually a Dundee from the office, like that came with a container for candy. So I'd put candy in it, and they'd get this trophy with the candy, and that would be their thing. And so we'd have this like unveiling, like who was the worker of the week, and I'd present it to one of them. That's not something that I have the energy to do ongoing, or that would even work ongoing, but as just something to jazz things up once in a while. I like to just kind of introduce a game, or little friendly competition once in a while, that just kind of makes things new again, even if the chores themselves aren't new or something like that. So yeah, so a game or a competition, especially that worker of the week really works once in a while, and I bring it back probably, like once or twice a year. We'll be like, okay, we're gonna do worker of the week again, so just so you know, I'm watching you. And then there are certain kids that put more effort in than others, and they get rewarded because they get to be the worker of the week. So that's my second experiment.
I think that's a great idea. And like you said, it keeps it fresh, and a little friendly competition usually works great. I mean, it works great at my house. So I understand it wouldn't work great for everyone, but I think that it's a great idea if it's something that would work for your kids. And yeah, any kind of reward.
Right.
Help get everybody excited again about getting their work noticed. So I think that's a great idea.
Thank you so much. This has been so great. I can't wait to try some of your experiments and try your guides. I've been meaning to buy them for years, and I am finally buying them, and am excited to implement them in my own home, especially now that I know that trick of, passing them out and not just keeping them in the room where they go. I think that's going to work really well for my family. So I really appreciate you taking the time to explain and just share what's worked in your family.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me talk about them and how they came to be. And it's fun to think back about how it all began and where it's gone to and how it's helped so many families. And I hope it helps yours too. So good luck to everyone with their chore endeavors. Parenting is not for the faint of heart.
Thank you for listening to the Family Lab podcast. If you're also working on spring cleaning and getting kids to help around the house, you might want to check out another recent episode called Teaching Kids to Notice and Do with Sam Kelly. That's a great one. And there's a whole list of back episodes about motivating kids to work, teaching kids to work, some case studies thrown in there. I have a complete list of these in the show notes so that you could just kind of pick through those and find what might work for your family. And again, join us in our open labs on Wednesdays. As always, thanks to my mom, Susan Singley, for playing the theme music for my podcast. She used to play this song all the time growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.